Hey guys, today I'm going to be doing a book review on The Second Mrs. Astor by Shana Abe. The Second Mrs. Astor by Shana Abe tells the story of Madeline Force, who becomes the second wife to John Jacob Astor, the richest man in the world. Their courtship causes gossip among high society, who are scandalized by their nearly 30-year age gap and think Madeline is out for his money. Madeline and Jack are truly in love and flee across Europe and Egypt to escape the press during their honeymoon. This love story is cut tragically short when Madeline and Jack voyage across the Atlantic on the ill-fated Titanic. Yeah, guys, I went a little overly dramatic with my review for this book, and I gave this book a rare 5 stars on Goodreads, you guys. Oh my god. I went a little nuts, okay? I rarely give books 5 stars. Now, in reality, is this book really a 5-star book? Probably not, you know? It probably is more standard historical fiction in some ways, but for me personally, just my own personal preferences and my personal enjoyment and my personal entertainment, I just freaking love this book, you guys. And so thus the 5-star rating on Goodreads from me. Yeah, not everyone's gonna like this book. There's definitely plenty of reviews on Goodreads. People didn't like this book, but yeah, those of us who liked this, yeah, we went crazy and we're like, hey, 4 stars, 5 stars. So yeah, I went a little dramatic in giving this book 5 stars, but seriously, I freaking loved this book. That's how much I loved it that I gave it 5 stars. And maybe this is also me just being very overly dramatic in my own fashion. This is the Madeline Astor book that I have been waiting decades for. Let's rewind back to 1997. You guys, come on this journey with me. We're going back to 1997. James Cameron's Titanic comes out, starring Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio, and I love that movie. Titanic is my favorite movie even to this day. And ever since, if you've seen Titanic, there's a scene like during a dinner sequence, and Rose is navigating around all the first class passengers, and she's sitting there telling Jack, hey, this is so and so, this is so and so, and she's giving him all the lowdown on all the gossip and scandal. And of course, she eventually winds up getting to John Jacob Astor and his very young wife, Madeline Astor. And, yeah, she kind of just gives a little bit of scandalous gossip there about their marriage and whatnot. And, yeah, ever since that little quick scene there, I have just always been fascinated with the story of Madeline Astor, and I've just always really been anxious for a historical fiction book about her. I don't know if that's just weird on my part, but I've always really wanted a historical fiction book all about Madeline Astor. You know, getting her thoughts and feelings, and why is it that her marriage with John Jacob Astor, why was it considered so scandalous? Why were people just gossiping all over the place, you know? How did she feel about that? What kind of woman was she during this time period, you know, kind of almost this end of an era coming up, you know? So yeah. This is the book. This is the Madeline Astor book that I have been anxiously waiting for decades now. You guys, once again, maybe that's me just being overly dramatic. But I just adore all things Titanic historical fiction. Just give it to me, pile it on up, I'll read it. Doesn't matter if it's good or bad, I'll read it. Last year, was it last year? It feels like it's been such a long time. Last year I read Alma Katsu's The Deep, and The Deep was like a Titanic historical fiction book, sort of. It's like it was kind of split half and half, with some things taking place on the Titanic and some things not. But I was very very disappointed with Alma Katsu's The Deep last year. And it was an okay book. I did do a review for it here on my channel if you want to know more of my thoughts and feelings on that. But my big problem with that book was definitely how John Jacob Astor and Madeline Astor were portrayed in that book. And they just came across as characters. They came across as just crazy people. And I was just absolutely disappointed with that, because I was excited for Madeline Astor in that book, and then I was like, no, this is not Madeline Astor. So yeah, here comes the second Mrs. Astor by Shana Abe, and I was like, yes, this is exactly what I've been wanting. So let me get into my thoughts and feelings on this book, and yeah, let me give you a quick historical fact sheet very quickly, just in case you are just completely in the dark about who the hell John Jacob Astor was and Madeline Astor and whatnot. Yeah, anyone who's a Titanic nerd, you know, we all kind of know the story of John Jacob Astor, who was the richest man in the world at the time. Not only was he the richest man, but some kind of little fun facts that I kind of learned while I was reading this book. He was an inventor. He even wrote a book. You guys, look it up on Goodreads. The man actually did write a science fiction book. Is it good? Probably not, but it's there if you look on Goodreads. But yeah, he did other things, you know. He wasn't just, you know, lazy, you know. He did do things with his life and with his wealth and whatnot. Things that I was like, oh, I didn't know that about him. So yeah, John Jacob Astor at the time was the wealthiest man in the world, pretty much, I think, especially in America. And he did marry Madeline Force, as she would, her maiden name would have been. He married Madeline Force. She was very, very young, like 17, 18, something like that. And that alone was a lot of scandal and a lot of gossip, you know, that, because it's almost like a 30-year age gap there between them. Yeah, people thinking Madeline was a gold digger, she was only out for herself and for her family and whatnot. Yeah, was it a love story? Who knows? And yeah, I think this book, as much as I did love this book, I do think this book it's very much highly romanticizing their marriage and their relationship. Probably, I would assume, because I don't think too terribly much is actually known about, you know, their courtship and their marriage and whatnot. And it was very brief anyway. But yeah, as far as some more historical stuff, John Jacob Astor and Madeline Astor, they're barely even married for like a year, you guys. I don't even think it's like a full year. They're barely even married for a year. They get on the Titanic. Everybody knows how the Titanic story ends. Yeah, John Jacob Astor, he is not able to get on a lifeboat. Madeline Astor does get on a lifeboat. She is pregnant at the time. And yeah, John Jacob Astor, he dies. He's found like a week after the fact. You know, he's found a week after the sinking. And yeah, even their dog, you guys, their dog named Kitty. Poor Kitty died as well, which is also a tragedy. So yeah, that's kind of the big overview there of what you need to know about John Jacob Astor and Madeline Astor. Just a very much gossiped couple during this time period amongst their peers and amongst high society and whatnot. So what I really loved about this book, even though, you know, down here under the title, under the second Mrs. Astor, it does say a novel of the Titanic, and I almost feel like that's a little bit misleading, because I think it's trying to use the words, you know, the word Titanic to really kind of grab an audience and whatnot. But it's almost a little misleading, because this book, the Titanic portions of this book are very minimal. It's a very, very small chunk of this book. So, and I actually like that, because I'm already very familiar with the sinking of the Titanic, you know? I don't need to have a whole nother book about the sinking, you know? So what I loved about this book is the very minimal bits of the Titanic, and the fact that this whole book is really the courtship of Jack, as John Jacob Astor is referred to throughout this novel, Jack and Madeline. How they meet, how they kind of keep meeting, and the events that they kind of keep attending together, how they start falling in love with each other, then yeah, their eventual engagement, their eventual marriage, and yeah, their honeymoon, you know, everything leading up prior to the Titanic, pretty much. So I love that this book, that was pretty much the whole focus of this book. But yeah, the whole time lingering in the background, you know, the events of the Titanic are coming. And what I also loved about this book, I think Shana Abe did a fantastic job making you, the reader, you know, even if you are familiar with their tragic love story, you know, even if you're familiar with that, she does a fantastic job making you feel like, oh, maybe it's not going to happen. Maybe somehow fate, destiny, whatever, it'll get averted. You know, she does a really good job kind of giving you that sense of ease, almost, you know, to the point that, yeah, once the sinking does happen, it's like you're almost in denial. Because even Madeline's in a bit of denial at some point, you know, thinking, oh, Jack's not dead, you know. You, the reader, are in that similar state as well, like in denial alongside Madeline, because you don't want it to be real. Because Shana Abe, I think she does just such a remarkable job getting you so invested into their relationship. Their relationship comes across as just very genuine and affectionate. It never appears that Madeline is a gold digger, you know. It never appears that way at all. She never comes across as spoiled or pampered, you know. She definitely comes across as her own woman, very strong and intelligent and witty, and she wants a life of adventure. She doesn't want to just be stuck in America or stuck in Europe, you know. She wants to travel the globe and meet new people and interact with different cultures. And yeah, Jack kind of shares that similar sort of passion that she does as well, you know. They don't like being in one place for too terribly long. They like learning and growing and whatnot. Something else that's also really interesting about this novel, in Shana Abe's author acknowledgments at the very end of this book, she compares kind of this relationship between John Jacob Astor and Madeline Astor. She compares Madeline to Princess Diana. And I definitely got those vibes while I was reading this book, because the two of them, their marriage was like just the most biggest of deals back in the day, you know. And as I've already mentioned numerous times, their marriage was considered very scandalous and people gossiped. It was just wild and crazy. They were all over the newspapers and everything, and people constantly taking their pictures, you know. They were a very highly publicized couple and whatnot. People were just so interested and so fascinated in their lives and whatnot. So that was very interesting, kind of that comparison that Shana Abe made, you know, comparing Madeline to Princess Diana. You know, two women just born decades and decades and decades apart and whatnot, and both their lives, just very different circumstances with their lives. But still, that whole notion of the publicity and the gossip and the scandal, you know, and the paparazzi essentially just kind of being all over them and invading their personal space and their privacy and whatnot. You know, you definitely get those vibes. And I love that's such a huge part of this book, because that's something Madeline has to deal with. You know, she's marrying the most wealthy man in the world, but with that comes a set of standards and whatnot, and people looking at her a certain way, and she's expected to behave a certain way, expected to do certain things, and yeah, after all, she is his second wife. So there's that situation too, that people are looking at her like, oh, she's the second Mrs. Astor. She'll never compare to the first Mrs. Astor and whatnot, you know. So yeah, Madeline has a lot on her plate, a lot she has to deal with. She definitely has a lot of moments where she has anxiety and a bit of depression and loneliness and a lack of self-confidence, a lack of self-worth sometimes, you know. She struggles on occasion, but the good thing is, there at her side is Jack, trying to be as supportive as he can, even if he doesn't entirely understand, because this is a world that he was born into. He's familiar with it. He knows how to navigate the terrain of all this publicity and all this fame, essentially. But yeah, she's kind of been thrown into it, and she's not expecting it. So I really love how all of that was kind of included in this book as well, because it kind of gave it an additional little bit of a layer there, you know, other than it just being a love story and whatnot. I also highly enjoyed the narrative structure of this book, how it was presented, because narrating the book, Madeline is pretty much narrating this whole book, but it's kind of done in two different ways. There is the first person Madeline narrating this book, and she's narrating this book after the fact, after the sinking of the Titanic and after the recent birth of her son and whatnot, because kind of the framework of this book is Madeline writing a letter to her son with the hopes of, hey, when you're older, I want you to read this note and I want you to know about the love story between me and your dad and the sinking of the Titanic and whatnot. So yeah, there's first person Madeline narrating the story, kind of this framework in a sense. And then there's third person Madeline, who is narrating kind of as things are happening. You know what I mean? She's kind of in the moment as things are happening, and she doesn't know events that are to come, you know, if that makes sense. So I really like the narrative structure of this book, and I really appreciate what Shana Abe did there, because at first I was like, I don't know if I'm going to like that very much, you know, but I ended up really quite liking it. It worked for me personally, kind of having the first person point of view and also the third person point of view. It really worked quite brilliantly, I think, in the end. So yeah, you guys, I freaking loved this book. Is it perfect? It's probably not a perfect book. As I mentioned, it is probably more just standard historical fiction. But for me, my personal interest, my personal taste, I was like, hell yes, I love this book. So yeah, would I recommend it? I would absolutely recommend it. If you love all things Titanic, if you've ever been interested in learning more about Madeline Astor and her relationship with John Jacob Astor and whatnot, yeah, or if you just like historical fiction in general, you know, this is definitely the sort of thing just historical fiction lovers will love as well. So yeah, guys, that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you like this video, you may like these other videos. Bye, guys.